Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books. And we got a room full of, or half full of, brand new persons, have just come to start to hear about Krishna. And here they are in a reading session of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. And they're so lucky. I don't know how old of you are, but one of you is at least 17, I know. And they're coming to the programs that we've been doing on Friday nights, or at least some of them, or one of them at least. And we'd like to welcome you. And there's 1,177 followers out there through that little gizmo. Yeah. They're not all there right now, but during the week, there's that many followers, and there's an average of about 500-600 views every time we speak on the Bhagavatam. There's two kinds of Krishna Katha. Krishna means the absolute truth, the supreme person, supreme being. And Katha means to speak. Haribo Lila? Lily? Lila. Lily. Maybe that's a Freudian slip. Maybe your name's going to be something like that someday. Who knows?
It's still pretty good.
Haribol Carter. Haribol. I'm tickled pink. I'm tickled orange. Whatever. So there's two kinds of Krishna Katha. I'm giving a little basis because some of the new persons in the room are hearing almost for the first time, if not for the first time, almost for the first time. There are two kinds of Krishna Katha. One is spoken by Krishna, and one is spoken about Krishna. The Bhagavad Gita is spoken by Krishna, and the Srimad Bhagavatam in general is spoken about Krishna by Krishna's pure devotees. And then there's a big section in the end of the Bhagavatam in which Krishna speaks again the Uddhava Gita. There's the Bhagavad Gita and the Uddhava Gita. So we are reading the Bhagavatam today, Srimad Bhagavatam. We've been reading it for quite some time. There's 18,000 verses. Let that sink in for a second. And each verse is so profound that it says things that you have to think about for the rest of your life. So 18,000 times rest of your life is a lot. So there's enough food for thought to keep you going and keep you fresh and keep you knowing more and more and more and being happier and happier and happier. And there's no limit. We'll get to the basics later. Hare Krishna. Now before we hear the Srimad Bhagavatam, we're going to recite a prayer that glorifies the Srimad Bhagavatam, composed by the senior disciple of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the most recent appearance of Krishna on the earth. Krishna appeared 5,000 years ago at the turn of the millennium, the beginning of the Kali Yuga. Just like we have seasons, now we're going, well, it's still winter, but Houston has a shorter winter than some places. But in some places the winter's pretty long and pretty severe. In any case, there's 4 seasons in general. In India there's 6 seasons, but in the West there's 4 seasons. So in each one of those seasons, there's a different climate, and sometimes we have to bundle up, and sometimes we don't care, and sometimes we have to, wear cooler clothes, and so on and so forth. And when Krishna disappeared from the earth after spending 125 years here, that was the beginning of the Kali Yuga. And the Kali Yuga is the Iron Age. It's the age of industrialization. It's the age of materialistic progress. It's the age of quarrel and dissension and confusion. But there were 3 ages before called the Golden Age, Satya Yuga, and the Treta Yuga, and the Dwapara Yuga. And they form one whole Dibya Yuga, or complete cycle of time. And a bunch of those make up a day of Brahma, a bunch of those make up a night of Brahma, and Brahma lives 100 years. And that's the duration of the whole cosmic manifestation. Just like our bodies, they have a beginning and, in case you haven't thought about it, an end. This is the most wonderful thing, actually, about time. Time is also a manifestation of Krishna, or, an expansion of Krishna. And it causes us to forget. The nature of time is to forget over time. So, Sanatana Goswami, and then Krishna came back to the earth about 4,500 years after he left, and that form is named Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and that was 500 years ago. And he is the inaugurator of the Hare Krishna movement. He appeared in India 500 years ago, and he started this movement of chanting the Maha Mantra, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And this sound is so nice that it gives one direct perception of oneself by realization. The self can't be seen just by the eyes, by normal vision. The self can only be seen through spiritual vision, purified by transcendental knowledge and devotion. Hare Krishna, Sangini Haribo. So, the senior disciple of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his name was Sanatana Goswami. And he compiled a prayer which analyzes what the Srimad-Bhagavatam is. So if you listen to it real carefully, you can get a better idea of what it is we're about to listen to. Okay? Hare Krishna. It's called Srimad-Bhagavatam Mahima Stotram. It's from the book that Sanatana Goswami wrote called Sri Krishna Leela Stava. And it goes like this. Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths. You are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabho Kalidwandodita Ditya Shri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master, Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshakshadayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Mreka Bando Matsangin Madguro Man Mahadana Madnistadaka Madbhagya Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu sadhu tadayin Ati nicho chatakada hanamuncha kadachin mam premnarit kandayospura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we've reached the third canto, 33rd chapter, which, by the way, is the last chapter of the third canto. And we're going to begin with text 11. Kapila Dev is speaking. Kapila Dev is an incarnation of Krishna. Means that Krishna appears from time to time in the history of the universe in order to uplift and purify a time-worn culture. From time to time, the human society becomes degraded. It's like on a roller coaster, or a merry-go-round, going around and up and down. Sometimes it's very elevated, sometimes it's degraded, sometimes it's elevated, sometimes it's degraded. It's the nature of time, cyclical time. So Kapila Dev came, and he's speaking to his mother, Devahuti, and she's asked him questions. And his answers form the basis of the Sankhya philosophy. Sankhya means the Sanskrit word that means to count. So Sankhya philosophy enumerates the details of the creation, how it's begun, the different parts of the creation, how it's created, how it's put together, what the purpose, the original purpose of all the parts of the universe are, how it all puts together in order to satisfy the desires of the conditioned souls. All of us who are in the material world are called conditioned souls. And when we are in the spiritual world, we are liberated souls. Conditioned souls are jiva, atma. And the conditioned souls, the liberated souls are called Brahma, Bhuta. Okay, so now we're just hitting the end of this very deep discussion of Sankhya philosophy. But just try to appreciate how nice it is. And be patient. You've got a long ways to go, all of us do, to learn what the absolute truth is. It's a very deep, but at the same time, very satisfying subject matter. Even just the sound, if you're not understanding everything, the sound will take you somewhere if you're attentive. Okay, text 11. We'll skip the Sanskrit, we'll just read the English. My dear mother, those who are actually transcendentalists certainly follow my instructions as I have given them to you. You may rest assured that if you traverse this path of self-realization perfectly, surely you shall be freed from fearful material contamination and shall ultimately reach me. Mother, persons who are not conversant with this method of devotional service certainly cannot get out of the cycle of birth and death. Purport. Material existence is full of anxiety, and therefore it is fearful. One who gets out of this material existence automatically becomes free from all anxieties and fear. One who follows the path of devotional service, enunciated by Lord Kapila, is very easily liberated. Text 12. Sri Maitreya said, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Kapila, after instructing his beloved mother, took permission from her and left his home, his mission, having been fulfilled. Purport. The mission of the appearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the form of Kapila was to distribute the transcendental knowledge of Sankhya philosophy, which is full of devotional service. Having imparted that knowledge to his mother, and through his mother to the world, Kapila Dev had no more need to stay at home, so he took permission from his mother and left. Apparently he left home for spiritual realization, although he had nothing to realize spiritually, because he himself is the person to be spiritually realized. Therefore, this is an example set by the Supreme Personality of Godhead while acting like an ordinary human being, so that others may learn from him. He could, of course, have stayed with his mother, but he indicated that there was no need to stay with the family. It is best to remain alone as a brahmachari, sannyasi, or vanaprastha and cultivate Krishna consciousness throughout one's whole life. Those who are unable to remain alone are given license to live in householder life with wife and children, not for sense gratification, but for cultivation of Krishna consciousness. Text 13. As instructed by her son, Devahuti also began to practice bhakti yoga in that very ashram. She practiced samadhi in the house of Kardama Muni, which was so beautifully decorated with flowers that it was considered the flower crown of the river Saraswati. Purport. Devahuti did not leave her house because it is never recommended for a woman to leave her home. She is dependent. The very example of Devahuti was that when she was not married, she was under the care of her father, Swayambhuva Manu, and then Swayambhuva Manu gave her to Kardama Muni in charity. She was under the care of her husband in her youth, and then her son, Kapila Muni, was born. As soon as her son grew up, her husband left home, and similarly, the son, after discharging his duty towards his mother, also left. She could have also left home, but she did not. Rather, she remained at home and began to practice bhakti yoga as it was instructed by her great son, Kapila Muni. And because of her practice of bhakti yoga, the entire home became just like a flower crown on the river Saraswati. Text 14. She began to bathe 3 times daily, and thus her curling black hair gradually became gray. Due to austerity, her body gradually became thin and she wore old garments. Purport. This is the practice of the yogi, brahmachari, vanaprastha, and sannyasi, to bathe at least 3 times a day, early in the morning, during noontime, and in the evening. These principles are strictly followed even by some grihastas, especially brahmanas, who are elevated in spiritual consciousness. Devahuti was a king's daughter and almost a king's wife also. Although Kardama Muni was not a king, by his yogic mystic power, he accommodated Devahuti very comfortably in a nice palace with maidservants and all opulence. But since she had learned austerity even in the presence of her husband, there was no difficulty for her to be austere. Still, because her body underwent severe austerity after the departure of her husband and son, she became thin. To be too fat is not very good for spiritual advancement in life. Rather, one should reduce, because if one becomes fat, it is an impediment to progress in spiritual understanding. One should be very careful not to eat too much, sleep too much, or remain in a comfortable position. And I'd like to add to that, in the Bhagavad Gita it also says not to eat too little, or sleep too little, or remain too uncomfortable. Yes, exactly. Voluntarily accepting some penances and difficulties, one should take less food and less sleep. These are the procedures for practicing any kind of yoga, whether Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, or Hatha Yoga. Text 15. The home and household paraphernalia of Kardama, who was one of the Prajapatis, was developed in such a way by dint of his mystic powers of austerity and yoga that his opulence was sometimes envied by those who travel in outer space, in airplanes. Purport. The statement in this verse, that Kardama Muni's household affairs were envied even by persons who travel in outer space, refers to the denizens of heaven. Their airships are not like those we have invented in the modern age, which fly only from country to country, from one country to another. Their airplanes were capable of going from one planet to another. There are many such statements in the Srimad-Bhagavatam, from which we can understand that there were facilities to travel from one planet to another, especially in the higher planetary system. And who can say that they are not still traveling? The speed of our airplanes and space vehicles are very limited. But as we have already studied, Kardama Muni traveled in outer space in an airplane which was just like a city, and he journeyed to see all the different heavenly planets. That was not an ordinary airplane, nor was it ordinary space travel. Because Kardama Muni was such a powerful mystic yogi, his opulence was envied by the denizens of heaven. Text 16. The opulence of the household of Kardama Muni is described herein. The bed sheets and mattresses were all as white as the foam of milk. The chairs and benches were made of ivory and were covered with cloths of lace with golden filigree, and the couches were made of gold and had very soft pillows. 17. The walls of the house were made of first-class marble, decorated with valuable jewels. There was no need of light, for the household was illuminated by the rays of these jewels. The female members of the household were all amply decorated with jewelry. Purport. It is understood from this statement that the opulences of household life were exhibited in valuable jewels, ivory, first-class marble, and furniture made of gold and jewels. The clothes are also mentioned as being decorated with gold filigree. Everything actually had some value. It is not like the furniture of the present day, which is cast in valueless plastic or base metal. The way of Vedic civilization was that whatever was used in household affairs had to be valuable. In case of need, such items of value could be exchanged immediately. Thus, once broken and unwanted furniture and paraphernalia would never be without value. This system is still followed by Indians in household affairs. They keep metal utensils and golden ornaments or silver plates and valuable silk garments with gold embroidery, and in the case of need, they can have some money in exchange immediately. There are exchanges for the money letters and the householders. Text 18. The compound of the main household was surrounded by beautiful gardens with sweet, fragrant flowers and many trees which produced fresh fruit and were tall and beautiful. The attraction of such gardens was that singing birds would sit on the trees, and their chanting voices, as well as the humming sounds of the bees, made the whole atmosphere as pleasing as possible. Text 19. When Devahuti would enter that lovely garden to take her bath in the pond filled with lotus flowers, the associates of the denizens of heaven, the Gandharvas, would sing about Kardama's glorious household life. Her great husband, Kardama, gave her all protection at all times. Purport. The ideal husband and wife relationship is very nicely described in this statement. Kardama Muni gave Devahuti all sorts of comforts in his duty as a husband, but he was not at all attached to his wife. As soon as his son Kapila was grown up, Kardama at once left all family connection. Similarly, Devahuti was the daughter of a great king, Swayambhuva Manu, and was qualified and beautiful, but she was completely dependent on the protection of her husband. According to Manu, women, the fair sex, should not have independence at any stage of life. In childhood, a woman must be under the protection of the parents. In youth, she must be under the protection of the husband. And in old age, she must be under the protection of the grown children. But you'll notice that when they all left, she was by herself. And she became, in her own right, an ascetic, a great yogini. Devahuti demonstrated all these statements of the Manu Samhita in her life. As a child, she was dependent on her father. Later, she was dependent on her husband, in spite of her opulence. And she was later on dependent on her son, Kapila Dev. Text 20. Although her position was unique from all points of view, saintly Devahuti, in spite of all her possessions, which were envied even by the ladies of the heavenly planets, gave up all such comforts. She was only sorry that her great son was separated from her. Purport. Devahuti was not at all sorry at giving up her material comforts, but she was very much aggrieved at the separation of her son. It may be questioned here that if Devahuti was not at all sorry to give up the material comforts of life, then why was she sorry about losing her son? Why was she so attached to her son? The answer is explained in the next verse. He was not an ordinary son. Her son was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One can give up material attachment, therefore, only when one has attachment for the Supreme Person. This is explained in Bhagavad Gita. Param dvishtva nivartante. Only when one actually has some taste for spiritual existence can he be reluctant to follow the materialistic way of life. Text 21. Devahuti's husband had already left home and accepted the renounced order of life. And then her only son, Kapila, left home. Although she knew all the truths of life and death, and although her heart was cleansed of all dirt, she was very aggrieved at the loss of her son, just as a cow is affected when her calf dies. Purport. A woman whose husband is away from home or has taken the renounced order of life should not be very sorry, but because she still has the presence of her husband's representative, the sun. It is said in the Vedic scriptures, Atmaiva putro jayate. The husband's body is represented by the sun. Strictly speaking, a woman is never widowed if she has a grown son. Devahuti was not very much affected while Kapila Muni was there, but upon his departure, she was very afflicted. She grieved, not because of her worldly relationship with Kardama Muni, but because of her sincere love for the personality of Godhead. The example given here is that Devahuti became just like a cow who has lost her calf. A cow bereft of her calf cries day and night. Similarly, Devahuti was aggrieved, and she always cried and requested her friends and relatives, please bring my son home so that I may live, otherwise I shall die. This intense affection for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, although manifested as affection for one's son, is spiritually beneficial. Attachment for a material son obliges one to remain in material existence. But the same attachment, when transferred to the Supreme Lord, brings one elevation to the spiritual world in the association of the Lord. Every woman can qualify herself as much as Devahuti, and then can also have the Supreme Godhead as her son. If the Supreme Personality of Godhead can appear as the son of Devahuti, he can also appear as the son of any other woman, provided that woman is qualified. If one gets the Supreme Lord as a son, one can have the benefit of bringing up a nice son in this world, and at the same time get promotion to the spiritual world to become the face-to-face associate of the personality of Godhead. Text 22. O Vidura, thus always meditating upon her son, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Kapila Dev, she very soon became unattached to her nicely decorated home. Purport. Here is a practical example of how one can elevate oneself in spiritual advancement by Krishna consciousness. Kapila Dev is Krishna, and he appeared as the son of Devahuti. After Kapila Dev left home, Devahuti was absorbed and thought of him, and thus she was always Krishna conscious. Her constant situation in Krishna consciousness enabled her to be detached from hearth and home. Unless we are able to transfer our attachments to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is no possibility of becoming freed from material attachment. The Srimad-Bhagavatam, therefore, confirms that it is not possible for one to become liberated by cultivation of empiric philosophical speculation. Simply knowing that one is not matter but spirit soul, or Brahman, does not purify one's intelligence. We call this the conch shell of Maya. It's a sound that reminds us that we don't want to go to the material world anymore. The contrast of that sound to what we're doing is very stark contrast. We usually let it go by before we start again. We'll just give it a few minutes to pass on by. This train usually carries oil from one place to another. Did you know that? Okay, a difference between material sound and spiritual sound. Unless we are able to transfer our attachment to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is no possibility of becoming freed from material attachment. The Srimad-Bhagavatam therefore confirms that it is not possible for one to become liberated simply by cultivation of empiric philosophical speculation. Simply knowing that one is not matter but spirit soul, or Brahman, does not purify one's intelligence. Even if the impersonalist reaches the highest platform of spiritual realization, he falls down again to material existence, attachment, because of not being situated in the transcendental loving service of the Supreme Lord. The devotees adopt the devotional process, hearing about the Supreme Lord's pastimes and glorifying his activities, and thereby always remembering his beautiful eternal form. By rendering service, becoming his friend or his servant, and offering him everything that one possesses, one is able to enter into the kingdom of God. It is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Tatomam tatpato gyatva. After discharging pure devotional service, one can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead in fact, and thus one becomes eligible to enter into his association in one of the spiritual planets. Text 23. Thereafter, having heard with great eagerness and in all detail from her son, Kapila Dev, the eternally smiling personality of Godhead, Devahuti began to meditate constantly upon the Vishnu form of the Supreme Lord. Text 24 and 25. She did so with serious engagement in devotional service. Because she was strong in renunciation, she accepted only the necessities of the body. She became situated in knowledge due to realization of the absolute truth. her heart became purified. She became fully absorbed in meditation upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all misgivings due to the modes of material nature disappeared. 26. Her mind became completely engaged in the Supreme Lord, and she automatically realized the knowledge of the impersonal Brahman. As the Brahman realized soul, she was freed from the designations of the materialistic concept of life. Thus, all material pangs disappeared, and she attained transcendental bliss. Purport. The previous verse states that Devahuti was already conversant with the Absolute Truth. It may be questioned why she was meditating. The explanation is that when one theoretically discusses the Absolute Truth, he becomes situated in the impersonal concept of the Absolute Truth. Similarly, when one seriously discusses the subject matter of the form, qualities, pastimes, and entourage of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he becomes situated in meditation on Him. If one has complete knowledge of the Supreme Lord, then knowledge of the impersonal Brahman is automatically realized. The Absolute Truth is realized by the knower according to three different angles of vision, namely Brahman, localized Supersoul, and ultimately the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one is situated, therefore, in knowledge of the Supreme Person, this implies that one is already situated in the concept of the Supersoul and impersonal Brahman. In Bhagavad Gita it is said, Brahma Bhutak Prasanatma. This means that unless one is freed from the material entanglement and situated in Brahman, there is no question of entering into the understanding of devotional service or engaging in Krishna consciousness. One who is engaged in devotional service to Krishna is understood to have already realized in the Brahman concept of life, to be already realized in the Brahman concept of life, because transcendental knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead includes knowledge of Brahman. This is confirmed I just clicked the wrong thing again, I'm using the bar on the side, it's kind of because it's really big. Anyway, I clicked on the wrong thing. I have to find out where we are. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Brahmano hi pratishtaham. The concept of the personality of Godhead does not depend on Brahman. The Vishnu Purana also confirms that one who has taken shelter of the all-auspicious Supreme Lord is already situated in the understanding of Brahman. In other words, one who is a Vaishnava is already a Brahmana. Another significant point of this verse is that one has to observe the prescribed rules and regulations. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, yuktahara viharasya. When one engages in devotional service in Krishna consciousness, he still has to eat, sleep, defend, and mate, because these are necessities of the body. But he performs such activities in a regulated way. He has to eat Krishna Prasad. He has to sleep according to regulated principles. The principle is to reduce the duration of sleep and to reduce eating, taking only what is needed to keep the body fit. In short, the goal is spiritual advancement, not sense gratification. Similarly, sex life must be reduced Sex life is meant only for begetting Krishna-conscious children. Otherwise, there is no necessity for sex life. Nothing is prohibited, but everything is made yukta, regulated, with the higher purpose always in mind. By following all these rules and regulations of living, one becomes purified, and all misconceptions due to ignorance become nil. It is specifically mentioned here that the causes of material entanglement are completely vanquished. The Sanskrit statement, anartha nivritti, indicates that this body is unwanted. We are spirit soul, and there was never any need of this material body. But because we wanted to enjoy the material body, we have this body. Through the material energy, under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As soon as we are re-established in our original position of servitorship to the Supreme Lord, we begin to forget the necessities of the body. And at last, we forget the body. Sometimes in a dream, we get a particular type of body with which to work in the dream. I may dream that I am flying in the sky, or that I have gone into the forest, or some unknown place. But as soon as I am awake, I forget all these bodies. Similarly, when one is Krishna conscious, fully devoted, one forgets all his changes of body. We are always changing bodies, beginning at birth from the womb of our mother. But when we are awakened to Krishna consciousness, we forget all these bodies. The bodily necessities become secondary, for the primary necessity is the engagement of the soul in real spiritual life. The activities of devotional service in full Krishna consciousness are the cause of our being situated in transcendence. The words Bhagavat Yatma Sangshaye denote the personality of Godhead as the Supreme Soul, or the soul of everyone. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Bijam Mam Sarvabhutanam. I am the seed of all entities. By taking shelter of the Supreme Being by the process of devotional service, one becomes fully situated in the concept of the personality of Godhead. As described by Kapila, Madguna Shruti Matrena. One who is fully Krishna conscious, situated in the personality of Godhead, is immediately saturated with love of God as soon as he hears about the transcendental qualities of the Lord. Devahuti was fully instructed by her son Kapila Dev on how to concentrate her mind on the Vishnu form in full detail. Following the instructions of her son in the matter of devotional service, she contemplated the form of the Lord within herself with great devotional love. That is the perfection of Brahman realization. That is the perfection of Brahman realization, or the mystic yoga system, or devotional service. At the ultimate issue, when one is fully absorbed in thought of the Supreme Lord and meditates on Him constantly, that is the highest perfection. Bhagavad Gita confirms that one who is always absorbed in such a way is to be considered the topmost yogi. The real purpose of all processes of transcendental realization, Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, or Bhakti Yoga, is to arrive at the point of devotional service, or the super soul. Whoops. If one endeavors simply to achieve knowledge of the absolute truth or of the super soul, but has no devotional service, he labors without gaining the real result. This is compared to beating the husks of wheat after the grains have already been removed. Unless one understands the Supreme Personality of Godhead to be the ultimate goal, it is valueless simply to speculate or perform mystic yoga practice. In the Ashtanga Yoga system, the 7th stage of perfection is dhyana. This dhyana is the 3rd stage of devotional service. There are 9 stages of devotional service. The first is hearing. That's what we're doing right now, in case you didn't notice. There are 9 stages of devotional service. The first is hearing. Then comes chanting, and then contemplating. By executing devotional service, therefore, one automatically becomes an expert jnani and an expert yogi. In other words, jnana and yoga are different preliminary stages of devotional service. Devahuti was expert in accepting the real substance. She contemplated the form of Vishnu in detail, as advised by her smiling son, Kapila Dev. At the same time, she was thinking of Kapila Dev, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore she completely perfected her austerities, penances, and transcendental realization. Text 27. Situated in eternal trance and freed from illusion, impelled by the modes of material nature, she forgot her material body, just as one forgets his different bodies in a dream. Purport. A great Vaishnava said that he who has no remembrance of his body is not bound to material existence. As long as we are conscious of our bodily existence, it is to be understood that we are living conditionally under the 3 modes of material nature. When one forgets his bodily existence, his conditional material life is over. This forgetfulness is actually possible when we engage our senses in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. In the conditional stage, one engages his senses as a member of a family or as a member of a society or country. But when one forgets all such membership in material circumstances and realizes that he is an eternal servant of the Supreme Lord, that is actual forgetfulness of material existence. This forgetfulness actually occurs when one renders service unto the Lord. A devotee no longer works with the body for sense gratification with family, society, country, humanity, and so on. He simply works for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. That is perfect Krishna consciousness. A devotee always merges in transcendental happiness, and therefore he has no experience of material distress. This transcendental happiness is called eternal bliss. According to the opinion of devotees, constant remembrance of the Supreme Lord is called samadhi, or trance. If one is constantly in trance, there is no possibility of his being attacked or even touched by the modes of material nature. As soon as one is freed from the contamination of the 3 material modes, he no longer has to take birth to transmigrate from one body, from one form to another in this material world. Text 28. Her body was being taken care of by the spiritual damsels created by her husband, Kardama. And since she had no mental anxiety at that time, her body did not become thin. She appeared just like a fire surrounded by smoke. Purport. Because she was always in trance, in transcendental bliss, and the thought of the personality of Godhead was always carefully fixed in her mind. She did not become thin, for she was taken care of by the celestial maidservants created by her husband. It is said, according to the Ayurvedic medical science, that if one is free from anxieties, he generally becomes fat. Devahuti, being situated in Krishna consciousness, had no material anxieties, and therefore her body did not become thin. It is customary in the renounced order of life that one should not take any service from a servant or maid, but Devahuti was being served by celestial maidservants. This may appear to be against the spiritual concept of life, but just as fire is still beautiful even when surrounded by smoke, she looked completely pure, although it seemed that she was living in a luxurious way. Text 29. Because she was always absorbed in the thought of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, she was not aware that her hair was sometimes loosened or her garments were disarrayed. Purport. In this verse, the word Daiva Guptam, protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is very significant. Once one surrenders under the service of the Supreme Lord, the Lord takes charge of the maintenance of the devotee's body. There is no need of anxiety for its protection. It is said in the second chapter, second canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam, that a fully surrendered soul has no anxiety about the maintenance of his body. The Supreme Lord takes care of the maintenance of innumerable species of life. The Supreme Lord takes care of the maintenance of innumerable species of bodies. Therefore, one who fully engages in his service will not go unprotected by the Supreme Lord. Devahuti was naturally unmindful of the protection of her body, which was being taken care of by the Supreme Person. Text 30. My dear Vidura, by following the principles instructed by Kapila, Devahuti soon became liberated from material bondage, and she achieved the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Supersoul without difficulty. Purport. 3 words have been used in this connection to describe the achievement of Devahuti: Atmanam, Brahmanirvanam, and Bhagavantam. These refer to the gradual process of discovery of the Absolute Truth, mentioned herein as the Bhagavantam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead resides in various Vaikuntha planets. Nirvana means to extinguish the pangs of material existence. When one is able to enter into the spiritual kingdom or into spiritual realization, one is automatically freed from material pangs. That is called Brahma Nirvana. According to the Vedic scripture, Nirvana means cessation of the materialistic way of life. Atmanam means realization of the Supersoul within the heart. Ultimately, the highest perfection is realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is to be understood that Devahuti entered the planet which is called Kapila Vaikuntha. There are innumerable Vaikuntha planets, predominated by the expansions of Vishnu. All the Vaikuntha planets are known by a particular name of Vishnu. As we understand from Brahma Samhita, Advaitam, Achyutam, Anadam, Ananta Rupam. Ananta means innumerable. The Lord has innumerable expansions of His transcendental form, and according to the different positions of the symbolic representations of His 4 hands, He is known as Narayana, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, Vasudeva, etc. There is also a Vaikuntha planet known as Kapila Vaikuntha, to which Devahuti was promoted to meet Kapila and reside there eternally, enjoying the company of her transcendental son. Text 31. The place where Devahuti achieved her perfection, my dear Vidura, is understood to be a most sacred spot. It is known all over the 3 worlds as Siddhapada. Siddha means perfection. Text 32. Dear Vidura, the material elements of her body have melted into water and are now a flowing river, which is the most sacred of all rivers. Anyone who bathes in that river also attains perfection, and therefore all persons who desire perfection go bathe there. Text 33. My dear Vidura, the great sage Kapila, the personality of Godhead, left his father's hermitage with the permission of his mother and went towards the northeast. When he was passing in the northern direction, all the celestial denizens known as the Charanas and Gandharvas, as well as the Munis and the damsels of the heavenly planets, prayed and offered him all respects. The ocean offered him oblations and a place of residence. Purport. It is understood that Kapila Muni first went towards the Himalayas and traced the course of the river Ganges. And he again came to the delta of the Ganges at the sea now known as the Bay of Bengal. The ocean gave him residence at a place still known as Ganga Sagara, where the river Ganges meets the sea. That place is called Ganga Sagara Tirtha, and even today, people gather there to offer respects to Kapila Dev, the original author of the Sankhya system of philosophy. Unfortunately, this Sankhya system has been misrepresented by an impostor who was also named Kapila. But that other system of philosophy does not tally with anything described in the Sankhya of Kapila in the Srimad-Bhagavatam. That brings up a very important point that I should elaborate on. Because as time passes, there are different, what we call mission drifts of the philosophy that comes right from the source to us. There are branches of mission drifts that go away from that main line of philosophy, and therefore it's very difficult, and as time goes by it's going to get more and more difficult to find a source of actual knowledge that you can trust. And especially now on the earth, so many people have been let down by so many others in so many ways, not just spiritually, that it's very difficult to gather one's faith and hear something that's true. Because to be truthful doesn't mean just to pay your bills on time or do what you say you're going to do, be reliable and all those things. Those things, it's true, that's part of truth. But real truth means when you hear something that's actually true, you can recognize it and accept it. And that is the search of the soul in a human body. It's what makes the soul in a human body different from animal bodies and plant bodies and fish bodies and all the other living beings in the universe. So I just wanted to elaborate that because it mentions here that there was a imposter Kapila who came much later after Kapila Dev and spoke some words that were similar, but at the same time came to a wrong conclusion. So you have to be careful who you hear from. Therefore, in the Bhagavatam itself, we already heard this in the 26th chapter of the 3rd canto, in which Kapila Dev was explaining the different phases of creation of the universe. And in the place where, at the time, when intelligence, the material intelligence was created, the energy which makes up our subtle body, one of the energies, just like our body is made of earth and water, fire, air, sky, like that. So our subtle body is also made of energies, mind, intelligence, and false ego. These are subtle energies that make up the body that we dream in. And that body carries us from one gross body to another according to the mental state that we're in at the time we leave our body. So any philosophy that takes us away from that basic truth and teaches us how to properly leave the body is called atheistic philosophy. And it's not to be followed. Mainly the atheist philosophers say that at the end of the body there's nothing. So therefore you might as well enjoy as much as you can right now, because you just got one life, and then there's going to be nothing. They've got no conception of an eternal soul, eternal consciousness, being different from matter, and being eternal, even though they experience it. In this life we experience having a baby's body, having a little boy or girl's body, having a young man or woman's body, an old body. Then naturally we're going to get another body. Okay. Be careful who you hear from. That's the message. Even now, Kapila Muni is staying there in trance for the deliverance of the conditioned souls in the three worlds. And all the acharyas, or great teachers of the system of Sankhya philosophy, are worshipping him. Text 36. My dear son, since you have inquired from me, I have answered. O sinless one, the descriptions of Kapila Deva and his mother and their activities are the purest of all pure discourses. 37. The description of the dealings of Kapila Deva and his mother is very confidential, and anyone who hears or reads this narration becomes a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is carried by Garuda, and he therefore enters into the abode of the Supreme Lord to engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Purport. The narration of Kapila Deva and his mother Devahuti is so perfect and transcendental that even if he only hears or reads this description, he achieves the highest perfectional goal of life, for he engages in the loving service of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is no doubt that Devahuti, who had the Supreme Lord as her son, and who followed the instructions of Kapila Deva so nicely, attained the highest perfection of human life. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 3rd canto, 33rd chapter of Srimad-Bhagavatam, entitled Activities of Kapila. Hare Krishna. So, now we have a very nice, our favorite time. Well, maybe this is, anyway, Hare Krishna. We call it the reflection time. So anything that you heard that, you want to reflect on, or you want to discuss further, or you want to question, or whatever, please feel free. No kidding. I can't believe that you're going to ask a question and reflect on something. You're addicted. Go ahead. Go for it. Hannah's going to speak.
As we were reading about Devahuti, I started to see that she really was in her body. She wasn't just a woman. She was a spirit soul acting like it.
Amen, sister. That's exactly right. We're not the body. That's the basic principle of spiritual life. Unless you get it, understand it, and not just understand it, but live by it, then you can't go forward a step further in spiritual life. There's a lot of people who come from India and they're teaching all kinds of things, all different kinds of hot yoga and cold yoga and this yoga and that yoga, but none of them are talking about these things deeply, like the Bhagavatam does. But this is the source. This is the source of the information that they're trying to teach, or they just take a little bit of it and make something, change it so it sounds nice to the audience and take money and go away, basically. But real life, spiritual life is not like that. as we've heard in many of these purports, real spiritual life means that when your spiritual nature is realized or awakens, then you're no longer interested so much in the material world. But having said that, we don't reject either. You notice that Devahuti, she was living in a palace. She was in the middle of the forest, and she was living with her husband as a great yogi, a great sage. And she became very thin and, hair all tangled, and she was a princess. She was a daughter of a king, not just any king, but the first king of this universe, Swayambhuva Manu. And she was extremely elevated and pure-hearted. But she heard about Kardama Muni, and she decided she wanted him as husband. So she told her father, hey, I want this guy as my husband. And then he went there, and he didn't exactly have to talk him into it because he was into it. So, and then they weren't ordinary, boy and girl just getting together to, have sex. It wasn't just like that. It was, they were eligible to have God as their son. So this whole pastime is about that, actually. So, all the different forms of yoga and meditation, they culminate in knowledge of the Supreme Absolute Truth, or the personality of Godhead, His form, His qualities, His name, His pastimes, His entourage, and ultimately His abode. Because there is an abode that is like this abode, but the reality. This place is just like watching, a movie on a screen. It's like lights flickering, and it looks like something's happening, and, people are getting mad at each other, and nowadays they have all kinds of special effects. They can just take you into another place. But it's all just flickering lights on the screen. It's not real. So this material world is like that, only it's three-dimensional, touchy-feely. That's the problem. The modes of nature, which make up this material world, are like the three colors that we get in our inkjet printers, that mix together blue and red and yellow and make all the colors that you can imagine. All these fancy gizmos that have pixels and can show you all these different colors. They're just three colors basically that are mixed together. So in the beginning of the universe and in the beginning of the teachings of Kapila Dev, all these things are explained in detail. How the material modes come into existence, how they transform into the different modes of nature, how they transform into different bodily features and sense objects, and etc., etc. So, the goal of spiritual life is very deep. Very deep. And that world is, in the spiritual world, where Kapila Dev went, and where Devahuti ultimately went, is the goal. And it looks just like this world. Well, it's more beautiful, but the same forms are there. Men and women, trees, plants, buildings, families, everything that we see here and we become attached to here, except for one great difference. The forms are eternal. There's no time, there's no space. And that's what we're looking for. That's why none of us want to die. None of us want to get old. None of us want to get sick. But we do. And there's billions and trillions of dollars being spent to avoid those things. But they can't. They can make a fancy machine that can tell you 10 minutes before a tsunami hits and try to give you enough time to get out of the way of it. But that's all they can do. They can't stop the tsunami. They can't stop the, cyclones and the hurricanes and the forest fires, etc., etc. So even though it's a fact that if we were to live spiritual lives, all of us, the earth would become much, much nicer. The air would become clean again. Just like when you cut yourself or break a bone, you just sit there and look at it long enough and it'll heal. course, you have to eat a little food along the way, breathe some air, and get some sunshine. But in general, things just heal if you just leave them alone. You get a cut, okay, put bandage. 5 days later, take it off. Oh, it's healed. So the earth is like that. If they would just leave the hell alone, it would heal, and it does. In the end of this cycle, the end of the time that we're living in now, the Kali Yuga, which is the age of quarrel and industrial ages and pollution and conflict and all these things, and lust and greed and anger and avarice and all these things. At the end, it will change again. Anyway, that's a whole story. I don't want to give you too much too soon. Pat, please.
Mine is kind of on a question of a realization. This explains the process of starting Bhakti Yoga, and I think it's important, this realization of why we do Bhakti Yoga. And what I've come to is we do it because we're living in Krishna's pastime. Like, all these times were way before, and he's come down. And the reason we continue our role here is because we're playing a role in Krishna's pastime. So once you become realized of that, you continue working and doing your thing. Is that any bit correct?
It's partially correct. The creation of the material world is the pastime of the Lord. But these aren't the pastimes of the Lord. We're not performing the pastimes of the Lord.
Oh, I didn't mean the spiritual pastimes for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, on material plane, we're here, and then if you get pure enough, you get to enjoy them on the material plane before you go to the spiritual pastime.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And we do that through transcendental sounds. But there was a truth in what you said that you didn't know about. And that is that the creation of the material world is also a pastime of the Lord. But it is not a personal pastime of the Lord. It's a pastime of the Lord in order to enable us conditioned souls who want to try to enjoy ourselves in this material world without Him. That's what the material world is. It's a place that's created by the Lord as His pastime to give us a place to live and to try to enjoy without Him. And we think that there's something wrong with it because we can't enjoy forever here. We're thinking if God's all good, then we should be able to enjoy forever here. What's wrong? But the fact is that He gave us this world in order to give us a place to try to enjoy without Him, which is not possible. So we had the desire. He created the world to give us a chance to do that, but He's so kind that He creates it in such a way that we can enjoy forever here. And eventually, all of us will come to the point, at some point in time, of the realization that we don't really belong here. Then we can hear. You know, Jesus said, let those who have ears hear. Well, this is what it means. As long as one is trying to enjoy in this material world and thinks that this material world is the reality, or the ultimate reality, and tries to make it perfect by material adjustment, which is never possible. And with each adjustment we try to make, it makes the situation a little bit more complex, more problematic. But at the end, not at the end, many times, He comes into the material world and shows His pastimes, His actual personal pastimes, to show us what the truth is. What we really want is to be with Him. And then, once we've become purified, partially by the saturation of trying to be happy here in this material world, which is not possible without Him, then we begin to hear. Then we begin to hear. And I just want to tell all of you, young people, I say young because I'm not young, I am young, in case you didn't notice. I am young at heart, and I still got a lot of youthful energy left. But the body is not young, and you're very fortunate. I came to Krishna consciousness when I was 26. That was 46 years ago, almost 47. So if you're coming, what, 18, 22, hike. You know, I mean, this is such good fortune. And you're? 21? 21. Such good fortune. You cannot imagine. I prayed 24. You beat me by 2 years. Anyway, I just pray to Prabhupada, who's my spiritual master. You know, I met him a long time ago, and I sat at his feet, and I heard and watched a liberated soul in action. And I'm trying in my very insignificant way to be a peon, deliver the letter of this Bhagavatam as much as I can every day. And if you just take this process of hearing these books like this with the rest of us, your lives will become blissful. And although you can't escape completely, as long as you're in a material world, you got to answer the law of nature. You got to sometimes, so many things happen you can't avoid. You got to sleep some, you got to eat some, all these things you have to do some. But if you learn to do them with the purpose of purifying the body and mind, so that we can actually hear and eventually perceive for ourselves, because this is meant to give us direct perception of these truths. But it doesn't normally happen instantaneously. It takes time. Therefore, patience and enthusiasm and determination. But if you do that, you'll get a kind of happiness that is so wonderful. There's only one thing left to do, and that's to share it with others. That's it. And when you do that, you get a happiness from within. It's the embrace of Lord Chaitanya, actually. It's Lord Chaitanya embracing you from within the heart. And there's no happiness like that. Nothing can compare to it. Then it becomes easy to follow the principles and live a regulated life and all of that. So it's not that we give up anything. I mean, we're still reading from this, right? And we still, have this and all these things. But they're not ours anymore. They're not ours. And the more we come to that consciousness, whatever we actually need to do this service of giving spiritual life to others, it's provided mystically. I mean, I'm telling the truth, I haven't had a job in 50 years. More. I had no earned income 50 years. I just got off the plane for India. I'll be here for some time. I'll go to San Francisco. I'll go here. I'll go back to India. Come back here. I don't know how it's happening. Krishna takes care of us when we give ourselves completely. You can't understand it immediately, but it's a fact. I have personal experience. So, welcome aboard. Hare Krishna. And what else? Yes, Lily, please.
So we read about how Devahuti, whenever she was in the trance, was being cared for by the celestial maidservants that Kardama Muni created. I was wondering how he created those.
He created them by mystic power. There's mystic power in every form in this material world. It comes from the soul. Like we have these bodies, right? And the hair is coming out of our head. How's that happening? Our nails are growing. And if you cut the nail, it doesn't hurt. You can cut it, there's no feeling whatsoever. But if you cut it just one fraction of a millimeter next to it, it hurts like anything, and you got to do something because it can make your whole life miserable. Just a little cut on the end of your, Anyway, these are mystic powers that the soul has, that we can play music, that we can have children. These are all mystic powers. We're not doing any of that. Imagine the women that are here, you've got wombs, and you can actually create a human body in your womb. I mean, you realize how complicated that is? And you don't have any idea how that goes on. Just eat, sit there for a while. It's just like I said before, you cut yourself and then it heals. Yeah, you cut yourself and it heals. The earth has mystic power, the birds and trees, they have mystic powers. Every living being has mystic power. The perfection of mystic power is to become fully Krishna conscious and leave the body and go back to the spiritual world when you do leave your body. But Kardama Muni, he had very elevated mystic power that allowed him to create forms out of the ether.
This is from Rati Manchari. Dear Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. Thank you for the beautiful and meaningful explanation about the mission drifts and the danger of hearing from the wrong source. I have a question which may relate to that. We learned that there is the original Kapila who originated the Sankhya philosophy and the impostor Kapila who preached the atheist version of Sankhya. I have wondered why Krishna would arrange things in such a confusing way, with even giving these opposite philosophies as well as their propounders the same name. You don't want me to finish?
Yeah, finish.
It is because this world has a dual purpose, both to liberate some souls who are ready for it, and also to cater to many atheists and materialists who don't want to know anything about Krishna. Is it like expert cheating by the Lord, who is the best at everything, even cheating?
Yeah, it's true, but it's not like that. He exhibits his cheating propensities in different ways, but not like that. He's actually very kind, and he wants us to come back to him, and he fulfills our desires. He's like a father. A father may have an obedient son and a rebellious son, right? And you're the good son. I mean, the good daughter. Anyway, so, even if the rebellious son runs away, the father will maintain this is just an allegorical story. So the son goes away, but the father keeps the room, the way the son, waiting for the son to come back. They call it prodigal son in the Bible. So, because the soul, some conditioned souls are determined to forget, then Krishna gives the ability to forget and the paraphernalia to help us forget. That's why there are imposter Kapilas. Just like some people, they make a living out of making counterfeit money. You heard of that, counterfeit money? Yeah, if you get a counterfeit $100 bill and you try to spend it, they go, no, sorry. Oh, But the fact is that there can't be a counterfeit unless there's a real thing. But counterfeit means there's a real thing. So it's Krishna's kindness that all these things come into the world that appear to be counterfeit, so that we can actually find out what's counterfeit and ultimately what's real. So he's fulfilling the desires, like Rati said, he's fulfilling the desires of everyone, and therefore, aponam cha, sarvasya chaham riti sanavishto matak smritir jnanam apoanam cha. This verse is in the Gita, in the 15th chapter, 15th verse, and it says, Krishna says, I'm seated in the heart of all living beings, and from me come knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So we can't even forget Krishna without him sanctioning it and giving us that ability. But if we become lovers of Krishna completely, I mean pure lovers of Krishna, we won't be able to forget him even if we try, because he won't let us. So Prabhupada promised us, I use the word affectionately, Srila Prabhupada, the author of these books and the commentator of these books, he came and did something that no one else could do. And therefore he's very dear to Krishna, because Krishna wants us all to come back to him. Krishna has everything except for one thing, and that's the love of some of us, the ones who have come to the material world. There's many more souls in the spiritual world than there are in the material world. Many, many more. The only thing he doesn't have is the love of some of us. And he feels that. He feels our separation. He feels bad. Why? Because he sees that we can't be happy without him. So out of that compassion, he comes and arranges all kinds of things for us to come to the reality.
She was mentioning yesterday that even some...
She is? Camila.
She was mentioning yesterday that even her suffering gave her, propelled her into feeling a little bit blissful.
Yes, exactly. Correct. That's correct. Actually, the essence of this topic is that this knowledge is inside of us already. It isn't knowledge that is being forced into our minds or coming from outside inside. It's inside there already. It has to be awakened.
Or affirmed.
Affirmed. Yeah.
You hear so many different things out in the world. You wonder, am I correct in what I'm thinking? So sometimes you just keep it inside, but then you want to surround yourself by like minds, and you like you were saying, you wonder when you can trust the truth.
Say that. Repeat what you just said, please. Repeat what you just said. Thank you.
There are so many different outside sources of information. Yes, Camila. It's hard to sometimes wonder what's true, and I feel like our most intimate thoughts reflect that. And when we're around people who may not necessarily be on this plane of thought, we can feel that, and so we will keep ourselves quiet or we'll talk too much. But when we're around like minds or like souls, I believe you can feel that, and it affirms what you believe.
That's real love.
And you feel the love, absolutely.
Love means there's six expressions of real love. One is to share food with each other, to share presents, Christmas, spirit of giving makes everybody feel good. And even more important, to inquire confidentially and to reveal one's heart. But you can't reveal your heart to just anyone. You have to be careful who you reveal your heart to and who you inquire from confidentially, so you won't be exploited. So those are the symptoms of love. And you can only actually trust a pure devotee of God. And we're not saying that we're the only way. This is not a sectarian religion. There's one God only, and there's one process for satisfying him, and that is pure devotional service. But there is different degrees of intimacy of realization. And the Bhagavatam gives us the complete, as it was described in the purports we just read. If you approach the absolute truth from a great distance, for instance, you're looking, the scriptures give this example. If you're looking at a great distance at a mountain, it may appear to be a cloud, or just a clear in the sky, some
lump on the sky. Huh?
I've seen this actually in real life, like when you mistake mistaking mountains for clouds.
Yes, exactly. But then if you go closer, then you see more. And if you go right onto the mountain itself, then you see the trees and the flora and the fauna and the river and everything is beautiful, complete. Then you get a deeper realization. So the different realizations of God that are available in different religious scriptures and different processes, not all of them, but the ones that are actually have a path back to the Supreme Lord, they give different degrees of angle of vision. The Bhagavatam gives the complete angle of vision because it reveals the form of the personality of Godhead and His abode.
Bhagavad Gita as you said, was spoken in His word?
Yes, he spoke it. He spoke it. Therefore, in the Gita itself, it shows you. Could you look at the Gita? Look at it.
We read.
Pick it up and look at it. Yeah, pick it up and look at it, and you'll see that there's the Sanskrit is there, the Devanagari script. That script is exactly the same in every Gita ever published.
I was actually learning about the structure of the book yesterday. Is it not that it is the exact quotes from the Bhagavad Gita in Sanskrit, and then I'm so sorry I have a difficulty saying his name.
Prabhupada.
A.C.
Bhaktivedanta.
Translating and describing afterwards.
Yes.
That's very interesting.
Yes. If you go further into the book, just open up in the middle. Yeah. Now there you'll see. I don't know if does it have the Devanagari in that version?
This one doesn't have one.
Where's the Gita? Where's the Gita? Anyway, show this book. Look at this book. Yeah. You'll see the Gita, the Devanagari script.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the original sound looks like when it's vibrated.
Yes, this book doesn't have. I see.
Yes, yes. So in every single version of the Gita in the world, the Sanskrit, the Devanagari is the same.
Mm.
That's how we can say we know what God's words were.
As it was written, it was
Yes,
translated.
yes, not translated, transcribed.
Yes,
That's it.
Also,
And there's
I've heard if you go through all the purports, you can. There's shastric evidence to what Prabhupada.
yes, all the purports explain from different shastric evidence from different scriptures that are also authorized, unpacking the thoughts and helping us to enter more deeply into the thoughts, so we can realize. So this is very important. And if you look at the introduction, last page of the introduction, yeah, last page of the introduction, you see a big list. You should.
Oh.
There you go. See, Krishna, then Krishna to Brahma, then Brahma to Narada, then Narada Vyasadeva, Vyasadeva to Madhvacharya, then a whole bunch of other names, and then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Jiva Goswami, Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami.
Are these reincarnations of Krishna, or it says the disciplinic succession? This is not.
This is the disciplic succession, but the original name there is Krishna. He's God personally, the full personality of Godhead. And Brahma is a qualitative incarnation who engineers each universe. And Narada is his mind-born son. And Madhvacharya here, Vyasadeva, is a literary incarnation of Krishna, who compiled the Vedas, edited them, and made it easier to understand them in this age, and then wrote the Srimad-Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita. And then it goes on. So now the important thing, though, about this is that we're here 500 years after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You can see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu there? Yeah. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That's Krishna in the mood of Radharani. Radharani is the female counterpart of Krishna. Just like we got male and females here in this room. and there's male and females all over the universe in different species of life. The original Adi Rasa, the original relationship between male and female is Radha and Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Together, they make the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Lord Chaitanya came Krishna came in the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the mood of Radharani. Because what is the difference between the male and the female, aside from obvious differences? The female has a nature different, can nourish, can give comfort, can give shelter in a way that males can't. So there you have it, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he, out of supreme compassion, he comes and delivers the Bhagavatam and all these teachings and shows us, I was wondering where you were. This is Pranata Karuna, came from Vrindavan. So he came and chanted the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And he came with some other associates with him, not to get into too much detail. And because he was in the mood of Radharani, he gave love for Krishna freely. But the same thing you're getting now, you would have to meditate for 60,000 years to get by that process. So now, just do the math. You're a mathematician? No.
Not very good at math.
Anyway, mathematician. If there's anybody mathematician, figure this out. We're here 500 years after Lord Chaitanya. Krishna and Lord Chaitanya come once in a day of Brahma. 8,640,000,000 years, according to our time. So what's the percentage of 500 to 8,640,000,000? It's practically zero. It's such a small number. That's how fortunate we are. So Srila Prabhupada is a pure devotee of Krishna, not just an ordinary guru. I'm his disciple, and I initiate disciples, but I'm not like Prabhupada. That's why I dedicate my life to reading Prabhupada's words out loud to make sure that everyone gets. I'm like a peon. I'm trying to deliver the mail, but because I have a deep attachment for it, I'm trying to inject that attachment into others' hearts, but in this way. But Prabhupada is world acharya. Prabhu means master, pada means feet. So Prabhupada is the master at whose feet all other masters must sit to learn the absolute truth. And he heard from a person who heard from a person who heard, only 11 persons removed from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. So that's how lucky we are. And that's why this knowledge and these books are so powerful and so potent. Because they're being elaborated upon by a person who's heard only 11 people removed. And I'm number 12, you're number 13. If you take this seriously, it'll be your turn.
Any pressure from it.
Every one of you, all of you, you're meant to do what I'm doing right now in the future. The present disciple is the future guru. That's the system. That's the way it works. But in order to do that, you have to be serious and you have to become purified. You have to remove your doubts. Go to the 4th chapter, the last verse. Wait. Yes, 4th chapter, last verse. Read the English. It's 4th chapter, last verse.
Therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. armed with yoga, O Bharata, stand and fight.
That's it. So we are at war with illusion. And illusion, the word for illusion in Sanskrit is maya. Ma, not. Ya, that. Not that. So when you accept something that is not true to be true, that is maya, not that. Maya, illusion. So we're at war against illusion. And the material energy is always trying to convince us, maya, that something that's not true is true. So we need to be armed. The war that we're in, you don't have weapons, nobody's killed. All this nonsense that's going on in terms of gun control, all these things, it's so damaging to the psyche, to the human psyche. The whole planet is being, ruined actually. Human society is being taken down, into the drain by all this activity. So we're at war against that, but not by weapons, by transcendental sound and knowledge. So first of all, we have to cut the knots of the illusion that is making us think that we are the body. We're not the body. We have the body. Just like I say that this is my microphone. It's not mine, it belongs to somebody else. But anyway, just for example, this is my microphone. It's still my microphone. It's over there and I'm over here. There's a difference between me and the microphone. So in every language of the world, they say the same thing. My body. Every language, there's a phrase, my body, my mind, my intelligence. You are very intelligent. There's a difference between me and my body, but we're not being taught. Not in school, not by our parents, not by our friends, not by our teachers. The difference between me and my body. And even the biggest scientists in the world, they cannot accept that consciousness is a separate category of energy. It's not material energy, it's spiritual energy, and it's eternal. The soul is eternal. The individual soul is eternal. We have eyes and nose and mouth and ears and all the other parts of the body, arms and legs. And therefore we can touch and taste and move and feel and do all the things that we do. Because the body, the material body, is inert. The chemicals and constituents of the body
Do you use a microphone?
are inert. But we are not inert. The signals that are going from the light and the smells and the feeling and all the things into the body and then through the brain and the electronic apparatus. We don't actually see those things inside the brain. There's no physical form inside the brain or some taste, some smell, whatever. It's the soul that's tasting those things. It's the spiritual body, the spiritual senses that are tasting those things, that are seeing those things, that are smelling those things, that are hearing those things. So once you get this clearly in your consciousness and start to meditate on it, this is real meditation. Not that I just sit and try to stop my mind and, meditate on a candle flame and then go into some kind of trance or whatever, and then stop thinking and merge into the oneness. That is illusion. That's Maya. But the whole world, just like the whole world has accepted Darwin's theory of evolution, the whole world is now beginning to accept this impersonal philosophy as being the absolute truth. And therefore, if you want to talk about God, no, there's none. Want to talk about consciousness? No, you can't talk about consciousness. Why? You can't taste it. You can't feel it. You can't put it in the laboratory. You can't put it in a test tube. You can't nitrate it to figure out what it is. But everyone knows it's there at the same time.
The only word I can think of right now is experience.
Yes.
Experience.
Yes. Consciousness. You experience everything through consciousness. Without the consciousness, you can't experience anything. Very good. Thank you very much. But now we're going to stop. Thank you so much, all of you. Welcome aboard. And this is the fast train to Vaikuntha. Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Kapila Dev ki jai. Devahuti Ma ki jai. Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol.